Hugh Jackman stars as Jean Valjean in the latest production, the movie of Les Miserables. When Jackman was asked about playing this role, he said something very interesting. He said, "For me, Jean Valjean comes from a place of the greatest hardship that I could ever imagine, and he manages to transform himself from the inside." Victor Hugo uses the word transfiguration. It's more than a transformation because he becomes more godlike. It's a religious or spiritual change, something that happens from within. To me, says Jackman, it's one of the most beautiful journeys ever written. If you know the play, one of the most poignant scenes is when Jean Valjean, the former prisoner, after being welcomed to spend the night at the bishop's house, steals the costly silver. And when he's caught, the police bring him back to face the bishop, who, rather than accuse him of stealing, asks him why he didn't take the candlesticks. Valjean was never the same after that overwhelming experience. He had been on an exhausting journey, and this for him was an epiphany. He was transformed. This weekend, we celebrate the journey of the Magi. We reflect upon the epiphany that they experienced. What is an epiphany? Well, I tend to like Maya Angelou's definition of epiphany. She writes, "It's the occurrence when the mind, the body, the heart, and the soul focus together and see an old thing in a new way." Jean Valjean saw life in a totally new way after his encounter with the bishop. It was a totally unexpected experience that changed him forever. So you see, that one epiphany helped him to realize that life wasn't as cruel or heartless as he thought it was. The Magi went in search of a king. What they found was totally unexpected: an infant in a wooden manger with a poor mother and father. T.S. Eliot, in that famous poem, The Journey of the Magi, expresses what must have been going on in the minds of the Magi, how they were complaining about their journey, how painful it was, how tedious it was, and then what do they find? They find a child. In Eliot's poem, they ask themselves, was all this folly? They seem generally unimpressed by the infant. And yet we know that the Magi realized that this child changed everything for them. In the poem, one of the Magi asks, "Were we led all that way for birth or death?" They were transformed by this epiphany. They were never the same again. They had to return to their homeland by a totally different route. They were born to something new, and they had to die to the old expectations. Journeys and epiphanies. Isn't that what life's all about? In this story of the Magi, there are three important elements that really parallel our journeys. The first one is they were on a long journey, sometimes painful and tedious. Secondly, they couldn't do it alone. They needed others to help them. And finally, when they found what they were looking for, it wasn't what they expected it to be. Like the narrator in Eliot's poem, how often do we see ourselves saying and asking, was all this folly? I don't believe that Jean Valjean believed that his journey was all folly, nor do I believe that the Magi truly felt that. The poem simply reflects the frustration that we often feel as we make our journeys. The challenge seems to be for all of us to be awake to the epiphanies that happen to us every single day. Barry Zito was once known as one of the most dominating pitchers in the Major League Baseball. If you remember, in 2010, he reached his lowest point. He was removed from his team's starting roster. The next season, he was plagued by injuries and poor performance. By the end of 2012, he had returned to his peak performance and winning his last 14 starts, and he played a pivotal role in the San Francisco Giants' World Series victory. He gave an interview back last year, 2012, where he shared his epiphany. He said this, he said, "Sometimes you have to go through difficulty and physical trials to really get broken down. In 2011, I got broken down physically as well as mentally, and in August of that year, I had this very odd injury in April of 2011. I came off that field that day after never being hurt in 11 years, and I said, all right, something bigger is going on here. A message is being sent, and I've got to listen to it." He could have given up. He could have just stated, all this is folly. Instead, he paid attention. He discovered his epiphany, life-changing events that transformed him. There are so many events that happen to each of us in this life that we really need to look at them in the same way that Barry Zito looked at his. There's something bigger going on here. A message is being sent, and I've got to listen to it. It might be a divorce, unemployment, an illness, a move, financial distress, a natural disaster. But it can also be happy experiences, a marriage, a new child, a new job, running into an old friend one hasn't seen for years. Or perhaps for our nation, perhaps the epiphany happened in Connecticut or Webster, New York. So many things are happening around us that we need to be aware of and allow them to change us forever. They are epiphanies that tell us that we can never return in the same way we came. So like the Magi, we are all on a long journey. We cannot do it alone. We need each other. And often our expectations are not met. And often we are tempted to believe that it's all folly. But if we listen to and are open to the epiphanies happening all around us, we can be transformed. We can see old things in new ways, as Maya Angelou writes. T.S. Eliot writes in that poem, "Were we led all this way for birth or death?" Well, that's the question that faces each one of us every day. Will we be open to pay attention to the epiphanies in our lives and allow them to rebirth us in ways that we had never imagined? Or not pay attention and die to the tremendous opportunities for growth that they provide us? The Magi, Jean Valjean, Barry Zito, they listened to the events in their lives and were transformed from deep within inside themselves. Each one of us experiences epiphanies every single day if we only pay attention to them. So as we begin this new year of 2013, let that be the challenge for each one of us. What are these epiphanies in my life? And can I allow my mind and my body and my heart and my soul to focus together to see old things in totally new and different ways?